Hi, my name is Marc, and I am a permanent resident here in the Philippines. Today I'll be doing a Q&A about my experience and what I know about the Philippines. Does Marc know how to cook rice the Filipino way? I have to be honest, my cooking skills are a 0.5 out of 10, and I love rice, but I have absolutely no idea how to cook rice. I just buy it already cooked for me. So I have to say, unfortunately, I don't know how to cook rice, and certainly not the Filipino way. What's the craziest thing Marc experienced in the Philippines? Well, I took a team of my staff. The first time I was in the Philippines was in Boracay. We went there in January 2017, and one of my team members decided that I had to try balut, but they didn't tell me. They got it, and I was placed in front of the fact that you got to try this. So I had a bit of peer pressure around probably 6 or 7 Filipinos in front of me to try balut. So I would say that was probably my, craziest experiences. But I had a few more as well. Like the first time I went to a restaurant, and it was in Makati, in Manila, and they brought some chicken, different plates, and I was by myself. There was a young couple sitting next to me, and I'm looking for the knives, cut the chicken. And the young lady is laughing at me, and his boyfriend said, "Sir, you have to use your spoon to cut the chicken." I'm like, seriously? Use a spoon to cut chicken? Where's the knife? Well, I've learned since then that most of the time you eat with a fork and a spoon.
And how was the experience, by the way, eating balut?
I wouldn't do it again.
You're not going to do it.
No. Once and done.
Once and done.
Yes. All right. For the next one. Does Marc know any Bisaya and Tagalog words? I wish I knew more. I will tell you the 2 that I know. Because one of the things about the Philippines, like if I go to Spain, Mexico, or any countries, the local language is written everywhere. So you get to learn the words just by seeing written material everywhere. When you come to the Philippines, you will barely, if ever, see any written Bisaya or Tagalog. So it gets pretty hard to learn the language or learn any words because all you hear are people talking in a language you don't understand. So I know Salamat. That's one. That's an easy one. And now you're probably going to laugh. I know Guapo and Guapa. So I was at a coffee shop back in probably 2018. It's a quiet afternoon, and there are 4 staff behind the counter. 1 gentleman and 3 young ladies. And then the 3 young ladies are going and sort of like laughing and, gossiping. And then there's something laughing, and she said, blah, 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 guapo. And I'm like, I don't understand what it is. So the guy that's doing my drink said, "Sir, do you understand what it means?" I'm like, no idea. He said, "It means you're handsome." "Oh, really?" So I asked him, "How do you say pretty, beautiful?" He said, "Guapa." So I turned around and said, "You ladies are guapa." And they giggle again. So I remember those 2 words. All right, next question. How does Marc get around the place? Well, I've never tried a jeepney. It looks hot as hell. However, those little buses in Cebu, kind of cute. So I think this is more comfortable. But I get around mostly using taxis. So that has been my main mode of transportation outside of walking. I've tried motorbikes for the first time this year. Being proactive and getting to learn things, if you look around and you read on blogs, they say you shouldn't ride a motorbike because it's not as safe, as a lot of people get injured on motorbikes. But the one thing to know here in the Philippines is when it rains, taxis are nowhere to be seen. They're not available. Because people that don't usually use taxis and will usually use them when it's raining, so you're gonna wait hours and hours and don't count on Grab, Uber equivalent here, to be available when it rains. So you're a little bit of a hostage to the weather. So back in late November 2022 this year, I was at Ayala Mall in Cebu Business Park, and it just had rained. There was probably 30 people in the queue, in a line to get a taxi. And there was a few guys waiting for clients for motorbikes. And I'm looking at, there's 1 taxi every 5 minutes comes in. There's 30 people in front of me. And not being very patient, I'm good for a lot of things, but waiting in line is not my strong suit, although it's a big thing here in the Philippines. So I only had my backpack, and I got tempted by one of the guys who was there. Like, maybe I can take a motorbike. And it was not dry, but it was not raining. So it was my first time to kind of tip my toes in the water and try it. So I went to the guy and said, "You're going to be driving slow and I'm counting on you." He said, yeah. So we negotiated the price. It was only like a 10-minute ride to my condo. So I tried it. The guy was very slow, very prudent. So I had a good experience. So now, once in a while, if I don't carry a lot of things and I want to go from point A to point B, like IT Park to a yellow mall here or short distances, at times I will try motorbikes. And I've tried trikes also, but mostly taxis. Because for us foreigners, although they're expensive here, cabs can be very, very, very expensive in the West. And for the same ride, let's say here in Cebu from Mactan Airport to my condo, it's a 45-minute ride, give or take, depending on the traffic. Cost will be about 300 pesos or what, $6, $8 American. But the same ride will be about 8 to 10 times in Canada from where I am, for the same ride, same distance. So in that sense, for us, the equivalent cost of transportation here in the Philippines is fairly low. All right, what places would Mark recommend for these upcoming tourists in the Philippines? Well, a lot of people ask me, have you been to the beaches and different places? So I've been to Boracay, absolutely worth going. I'm a city guy, and especially I've been traveling mostly solo. And a lot of the reasons why I've been coming to the Philippines since I started was actually to do workshops, volunteer workshops in sports. So clinics, coach education workshops, youth sports things. So what I like most is connecting with the locals. And it means that a lot of what I've been doing, a lot of time I've spent here around Manila, Cebu, or Davao, have been connecting with the locals, doing sports workshops, education conferences, and clinics. So I haven't really been to the local beaches. The more nice places I've been, or Samal Island, so it's nice. In terms of places to go, I think if you're in the Philippines, schedule a day or two in Manila to see the city, Mall of Asia, Intramuros, and a few other places. But most of what is to be seen in the Philippines and worth visiting is not around Manila. So you don't come to the Philippines, in my opinion, for Manila. Like everything else is great. I love Cebu. I think it's a good base to be at, to go to resort or different places around the Cebu province. So I think it's a good place. I've enjoyed Davao as well. A lot of people hear that going to Mindanao in the south is not safe for foreigners, which is to a certain extent true for some places. But Davao has to be one of the safest cities in the Philippines, and it's worth a day trip to go to Samal Island. I really loved it. Other places to go, honestly, would be to meet the locals, go around. I mean, a lot of what happened here in the city are around malls. The malls here rivals anything you will find anywhere else. So in terms of recommendations outside of that, places I've experienced, Boracay is obviously a different destination, but I think there's many, and you just look online, it's always the same thing. Malbo, Siargao, El Nido, Coron, and the various places. So.
How about Sinulog? Have you tried?
Oh, Sinulog. How do you say that word?
Sinulog.
Sinulog. Here's the thing about it. I've been to Cebu probably 4 or 5 times in January, but I always have to fly back before, like on the 15th, because I start teaching on the 20th. So I start teaching the Monday after the Sunday of Sinulog. So I always miss it, but I've been in the atmosphere in the days leading to it, but I've never experienced it, unfortunately. And this year I was thinking I'd probably have time to experience it, but for personal reasons, different reasons, I ended up coming back here in the Philippines on late January instead. So I also missed it this year. But it's still on my list of things to do and experience because it looks wonderful. Next question. Which part of the Philippines Marks find really impressive? That's a good question. I mean, the beauty of the nature here is outstanding. Saying anything that people haven't heard before. I mean, I'll go back to, obviously, the beaches of Boracay, which I experienced. I was surprised with Samal Island is not that busy. So what I'm saying is like it still looks remote. You visit a resort there, but you have to take a boat over there. So Pearl Farm is exceptional. I went to another beach. Like it's like a 10-minute crossing, and then you can be there for the morning and go back. And so it's like 30 minutes from downtown Davao. So it was definitely worth going. We don't hear so much about it, but it's a lot of nice places there, so I've enjoyed it. I think one of the places that's impressive for Western to visit, and I only visited this year, I had the privilege to be taken on a tour of Manila back in October 2022 by Akiko Thompson. She's the former Olympians for the Philippines. So she took me to the Memorial Cemetery that's managed by the U.S. Embassy here in Manila. It's a memorial from World War II. I mean, the grass is golf greenish, and it's worth seeing in terms of what it represents. You know, you have all the names of everybody that was in the war and didn't make it, and so I was really, in terms of Manila, that's one place I thought was really worth visiting, and I only visited for the first time this fall. In terms of the cities, I've spent a fair amount of time in Makati, Mall of Asia. Mall of Asia is just a big mall. I mean, it's worth to go around. There's a lot of things to do. I haven't spent much time in BGC, which is one of the neighborhood people talk about. It's more expensive, but I've been to a coffee shop there. The vibe seems to be interesting, and a lot of the things that have to do with vibes. You know, that's how I rate places, how it makes me feel, how it feels. And my heart has always been here in Cebu in terms of the Ayala and the terraces, and just love the ambiance here around Christmas time, the lights and everything. So I think someone who likes more the city life, which I am, urban type of guy. But then this year, I discovered IT Park. So I've never really spent it. I've been here in Cebu many times over the last few years. I've never really spent any time in IT Park until this last few months. Rented a condo there for a little while. And I discovered a wonderful area where I barely got out of it for weeks. I just take a cab outside of it once a week to go somewhere, but you can walk everywhere, and it's got restaurants and food and the park and every services. And the difference with IT Park and other areas that I've experienced in cities is a lot of the life happens in the malls or just around the malls, where the heart and soul of IT Park here in Cebu is not the mall. The mall is like just an auxiliary service, an auxiliary building. It's in the park and in the restaurants around, so the vibe, and it's 24/7, and it feels alive, and it's well maintained. So that's one of my area that I really started enjoying here in the Philippines. Yeah, I think that's what I would have to share related to that question. Okay, what's a Filipino food that Mark likes? Anything adobo.
Anything adobo.
Yeah. Chicken adobo. I like chicken, so anything specific. I mean, there's a few desserts. I don't remember the names, but I've enjoyed. You gotta learn to love rice. It's a staple here. First time I came, I've actually learned how to appreciate rice for breakfast. The first morning I was here in the Philippines, first trip ever, I spent 24 hours in Manila before I flew to Boracay with my team members. And the first morning I got up, I saw Wendy's. So it's a Western franchise. I'm like, okay, they gotta have breakfast. It's open. I walk over there, and I see on the menu a stack of rice with an egg on top of it. Really? Seriously? I was like, I wasn't aware of it. So that was one of my first culture shock. But I've started to appreciate rice for breakfast. But if not, yeah, chicken adobo, pork adobo, lechon here in Cebu is always very delicious. Yeah. Where does Mark usually go out to eat? And does Mark know what a canrenderia is? Well, I'm picky and I'm not picky. What I mean by that is I'm picky in terms of certain food, but I'm not that picky where I get the food. I love Mexican food, pasta, chicken, meat in general. So here in the Philippines, it's pretty easy to find food. So just like I learned a few moments ago, the word carinderia, which means street foods or local food that's available, I've tried it. And one of the places I got to experience is the street night food market in Davao, closed street every night. So that was a good experience. There's food available everywhere. So I'm not too difficult, but I like, here the Cebu Mercado in IT Park is a great place. I mean, there's so much choices. Just too many people all the time. But if you go there a little early, a little later, there's so many good, freshly cooked food. So I really enjoyed that. If not, delivery app works pretty well, especially since the pandemic. You can get anything fairly quickly. So unlike in the West, a lot of convenience stores here like 7-Eleven have quick food you can get. So chicken nuggets, rice, and everything. So that's an easy way. If not, there's certain Western restaurants like Italianis and TGI Friday are a bit higher end, but Western I like to go to. If not, a few others like around the malls most of the time. Local restaurants, so I'm not difficult. I like meat around IT Park. I've gone to Wolflink, Johnny's, so many of them that I've enjoyed. So I have my regular places. The one thing I can say is I don't cook a lot, so I tend to eat out or order in most of the time. And again, for a Westerner, relative to the cost of living and income in the West, because one of the things that are like food, personal services like haircut, transportation, and lodging These are the four things that are a lot more accessible, or we get more for our buck. Like other things like electronics, or items that you can buy at the store, the deals are not that great. Sometimes it's more expensive than it is for us. But in terms of personal service, food, and so on, that's why eating out is always a pleasure, because you have so much choices and it's usually a fraction of the price that you used to pay. Okay, so does Mark like to hang out with locals? Yes, I actually hang out mostly with locals, not with expats or foreigners. I've been coming here in the Philippines primarily to do services and give back in Philippine sports. So one of the things I've discovered later in my life is I love to connect with people, different culture. I love to discover new culture. And I fell in love with the Filipino culture in general and its people when I came in the first time in 2017. I've had relationships with Filipinos in terms of my staff. I hired my first Filipino VA, virtual assistant, back in 2009. And one of my first hires was a freshly graduate guy here from Cebu. His name is Ivan, and he became one of my best friends. So Ivan and his lovely wife Adele are good friends of mine. So we see each other every time I come to Cebu. I have other people I work with. One of my co-founders in my business is Nolieo from Mindanao, who's involved in sports, so he's a good friend of mine, and I've met so many people over the years. So mostly when I hang out, I'm usually around Filipinos, so mostly locals, and I enjoy that. What does Mark think about Filipino time? Yeah. One thing I like about the pandemic is when you schedule a meeting at 1 p.m., people would show up at 1 p.m. But when you're given a time here in the Philippines, usually you have to, there's a currency exchange rate. So it's usually, if they say 7 p.m., it's going to be like 8 p.m. If an event is scheduled for 6 p.m., and you show up at 6:15, you're still early. You're still the first one there. So things don't start on time. Things start much later, especially social event. And I think the less urban it is, the more it just starts when it starts. So Filipino time, usually someone will pick you up. And then there's also factors like traffic here. So if someone is taking a public transportation, well, if it rains, there's traffic, even so much driving takes half an hour one day, next day takes an hour and a half. So you have to learn not to be bogged down with things not being on time, things not starting on time, and actually voluntarily, willingly go late to schedule social events, because they will start late. If you show up early, you'll be there by yourself. So when I think of it, it was an adjustment coming from a culture that values things to start on time. It was a bit of an adjustment, but now I've learned to deal with it. And I guess this is one of the things I had to get used to and adjusted to. Yeah. What is Mark's pet peeve in the Philippines? There's a few things. I absolutely love the Philippines. That's why I'm a permanent resident now. Lines is one of them. So here's a story for you. I was at a market, grocery store, a couple weeks ago in IT Park, needing to buy a few things. I get there, and there's lines everywhere, but I don't see how far they go. So, and I know here somehow transactions take 5-10 minutes per person, easy, to check out. So we go around and get some food, and then by the time we get to the aisles, every aisles is like very deep in waiting line. I'm not waiting. So I'm not patient enough to wait if I don't really want it. So I could come another time. So I'm willing to give up things if it's too much of a wait. So I try very hard. That's one of the things I use GRC's consultancy for. I don't want to wait immigration. And so I'm not I'm a patient guy in general, but I don't like to wait. So anything I can do to skip lines, not to get in front of people, but to maybe do it at another time or not to have to wait, I try to. Like for example, sometimes the months here, try to get to an ATM. There's like a long lineup because it's payday or So that would be one thing. The other thing that is really probably my biggest pet peeves, to be honest, has to do with how people follow procedures to the letter here. Here's what I mean. And they do a great job. We get great customer service here. But most of the time, frontline staff, frontline workers, people that are customer service, waiter, waitresses, that are not necessarily in a position to make decisions. They have to follow protocol or rules or regulations. If the book says this is the frame within which you have to operate, they're not allowed to go outside the frame. Silly example would be, I want to replace French fries with a Caesar salad instead. From where I am, people are used to that. Okay, maybe we'll charge you an extra dollar, or you can replace it. It's in the kitchen, just switch it. But here, oh, we can do that. Why? But we don't. And then the chef comes out and says, I'm sorry, sir, we can't do that. But there's no reason why not. It's just not something they do. Also, when you have to deal with, and I'm someone that tends to think out of the box a lot. So when you want a special accommodation or anything, like when I bought my condo, just wanted to extend by 30 days the final payment, but it was paid off, so they weren't, like, condo wasn't there, it's nothing. So trying to talk to a developer here, this is a big company, they have like 20 departments that don't talk to each other. So trying to get to someone we have to talk to this person, it's a nightmare. So I hired a legal help. Within half an hour, she has spoken to the vice president of that company to give me an extension. So you have to work your way up the ladder to find who's in charge to make adjustments. And there was another thing when I got a key in my condo, I wanted a second key. We were waiting for the final paper saying, yes, it's paid off. They got the proof it was paid, but they waited for the accounting department to say sign up before handing me all the keys. But I had to work my way up 3 steps to get a second key. So a lot of frontline workers in the Philippines don't have discretionary power to accommodate, which we're used to. So if I go to a store here in Canada, for example, the US, and I'll give you a little 5% discount if you buy this. So they have latitude or freedom to grant requests if it makes sense, if it's within a certain scope, but that's not the fact here in the Philippines. So if there's a script, they're only bound with that script. So that would be my pet peeve, because I sometimes think, maybe we could do it that way or that way. So I tend to be a little creative, and people here follow procedures. So that would be one of my pet peeves. Anything else? Weather and taxis not being available being one of them. If not, it's a great country. One more. Paperwork. We just opened a subsidiary for my business here in the Philippines, a corporation. And it's just very basic, nothing complicated. You need a permit for this, a permit for that. You need to you go to mayor's office, you need to go there. And so much paperwork for 5 transactions a month. So I would say they love their paperwork here. But I know that a lot of countries like it too. All right, the next one. How and when did Marc find the Philippines? Well, it started in 2008, first time. So that was around the time where a book came out called The 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss. That was a bestseller 15 years ago. The idea was not so much the 5-hour week as to learn how to delegate and outsource to overseas virtual assistant. That's where it started. Back in the days, then, makes me feel old, India was all the rage when it came to outsourcing overseas. But reading about it and learning about it, I started to read about the Philippines and how the cost and the value of the work you were getting for hiring Filipino virtual assistant was pretty good. So after about a year with an Indian company that was providing me a staff member or a full-time virtual assistant, decided to hire someone on my own directly for a third of the price for full-time. So I took a leap of faith, and that was the beginning of a great experience. So over the years, I probably had 25, 30 Filipinos that at some point, full-time, part-time, contract worked for me from different businesses. I've had 3 or 4 different things since 2008. But that's how I started to learn about the country. I'm someone who's curious. I love to learn about culture. I love geography. I like history. So I read up a lot, learned the culture. And then my interactions with the people I was working with were always pretty good. Great staff I've had. For the vast majority, excellent experiences with the people I hired. There's always a few exceptions, but by far it was. And they kept asking me, when are you coming to visit the Philippines? And I kept saying, one day. And then in the fall of 2016, so that would be November 2016, I decided you know what, let's do it. So I scheduled a trip here to meet. At that time, I had 5 team members. And I asked them, well, let's meet all together for the first time in person. Some of them have been working for a few years. And I asked them, well, I knew I had 2 of them in around Manila, 3 of them around 3 of them around Metro Manila, and 2 of them around Cebu. So when we meet in Cebu or in Manila, and one of them suggested, why don't we go to Boracay? I was like, what's Boracay? So I Googled and I'm like, oh, okay. So I said, okay, let's do it. So I rented a space in Boracay, and I had the time of my life. Like, we had so much fun. What was also quite an experience for me is that we rented a house by the beach there, which I would say was cheap, but in Western Standard, it was a really good deal for housing 8 people. They had staff, 4 people in the house, and someone cook, someone would drive us everywhere, and then security people at the front. But they're all Filipinos working, a lot of them working away from their families, making a living, to pay. Some of them seeing their family once a month or once every 2 months. But they were not used to getting Filipino guests. Most of the time, they were foreigners. I was the only foreigner. I had 6 Filipinos with me there. And they were pretty much all the same age, between 20-something and maybe early 30s. So we had a pizza and night party, like a film and pizza movie. And then at first the staff was a little uncomfortable joining in because they're supposed to serve. But I had the guy that had me try balut was also a good leader. He invited, come here. So they kind of loosened up a little bit and joined us. But it's nice for me. I was sitting there and observing all those young Filipinos having fun, and I was mingling with them. So I had really, really good time. We did all other activities. And most of us were not also people for going out or drinking, but we all went out. But none of us had were club type person. So it's kind of funny. We all kind of got drunk, but none of us are getting drunk type of people. So they had me dance on a speaker too. That was a good experience. So that was my first time about the Philippines. So basically it came from hiring Filipinos over the years and them inviting me to come here. And then the rest after that came from the fact that I'm also a sports coach in the sport of softball. And over the years, I made friends with the now recently named head coach of the women's softball Philippine national team, but she was an assistant for the last 10 years. And she's also a head coach at Adamson University. So she invited me to go to her practices a few times. We got to know each other online, and then we met randomly in Hawaii in 2012. She was flying to the US with a junior national team from the Philippines, and I was with my team at a tournament there. We just happened to cross paths in the airport, totally randomly. So first time we met in person. But then she came to Canada for World Championships, and so we stayed in touch for a few times. But she also then invited me to do clinics here in the Philippines. And I also said, well, I can do more than softball or baseball. I'm also a coach, educators in Canada. I train sports coaches on sports sciences, philosophy, leadership, and things like that. And she said, oh, how long would it come? Well, I finished teaching because I teach until mid-May. And I said, well, I can stay a couple weeks. So she got me in touch with different people. And that's how I started coming. Spent 2 months here in May to July 2018. About 2 weeks in Manila, 10 days in Cebu, and a month in Davao. And but I didn't have a lot of contact here in Cebu at first. So often when you do a clinic, there's, let's say, 10 coaches, but then the coaches want, oh, could you come to my school, talk to my coaches, or work with my athletes? So one event would mushroom into multiple events, but I didn't have enough time here to fulfill the request I had in Cebu. So like the Terminator said, I'll be back. So I came back, and I started really liking Cebu. So that's why I kind of made Cebu my second home. All right. So next question. Would Marc rather live in a condo in the city or live in a 5-bedroom house in the province? I'm pretty much a city guy. Yeah, I'm a condo guy. Would I wish the condo were a little bigger than a studio? Like I often tell people, like the condo I bought here is a hotel room. It's very tiny here, so you have to get used to this. But maybe 1 or 2 bedroom condo would be nice. But I like the city life, so that's an easy question for me to answer. Which is the best city for Marc? Well, I guess Cebu would be top of the list. I didn't know anybody really in Cebu outside my friend Ivan, but I feel at home here because I find it's the right mix of not being a crazy city like Manila, too much traffic, too many people, pollution. I don't know, I'm not a big fan of Manila. I mean, there's nice people in Manila. There's certain areas that are nice, but overall, I find going from one place to another not that enjoyable because of traffic, pollution, and everything. And so, where in Cebu is like a tenth of the size of Manila, but it also feels like a big city, but it's not that big. There's 1.5 million people around Cebu, give or take. So it's a large city, but it's not that big. There's traffic, there's places, it's not perfect, but I find that everything you need is here, and then it's closer together. And the other thing I really like about Cebu now is that the airport is a little bit out of town, but the new terminal is fantastic in Cebu. It's gorgeous. It's a really nice, very efficient. The experience at the airport now is good. And then from Cebu, most of the time you'll fly through Manila, but there are flights directly to Cebu if you come from Singapore, Hong Kong, and a few other destinations. So I kind of like the fact that also from Cebu, you can fly anywhere in the Philippines easily. I went to Bacolod about a week and a half ago. It's a 30-minute flight in and out. So I like the fact that I can go anywhere in the Philippines. Manila is a short hour flight. So if I need to get to Manila, it's easy to get to. So I find it's a good home base for going anywhere in the Philippines without having the disadvantage of the big city like Manila. I can go to Manila. I go once in a while for meeting certain people, doing business, or meeting other people. But overall, Cebu feels like home. I enjoyed Davao, spent time in Davao as well. It's a bit more spread out. People are super nice, but I feel like you're a little more remote at that point. There's very few flights that go elsewhere. I mean, so you can get out of Davao. Maybe there's a few flights go to the international city, but it's not a major airport. So I find you almost have to fly through Manila or Cebu to get to Davao. But I enjoy the city. I've spent quite a bit of time there, but I would say Cebu is definitely a city I enjoy. Oh. And the last questions. How much do you think an expat should budget on a monthly basis to live comfortably? Well, it really depends. People don't like it depends, but it is a question. So I would say, I mean, you hear a lot, you can see and find a lot of information about the Philippines where people can live comfortably, not comfortably, but can live on $800 US or $1,000 US a month, which is doable, but it's also depriving yourself. Like you can't eat out that much. You probably have to live in a condo, an apartment that's not as upscale as you can afford. You'll be out of the main centers. So you can live for not much. However, if you want to live a lifestyle where you don't really start counting money in a sense, like without being super extravagant, but going out or renting a decent condo, I would say in pesos, probably minimum 40, 50, up to about 60, 80. So that would be somewhere between 800 to 1200 US. With I think 1500 US, you're very comfortable here. 2000, you don't have any restriction. So it's a lot of money for the locals. But that's also, if you want to live in the city, in a condo, in the heart of things like IT Park and Manila is obviously, you also have to factor where you live. So cost of living in around Manila is a lot more expensive and things have increased. Prices have increased in the last few years here. I see a big difference between before and after the pandemic. Cost is much higher now. Cebu is still affordable, but it's gone up. You go to Davao, what costs, I don't know, like 100 pesos here might cost 80 pesos there. So you still get 30%. So it really depends on where you go. That's another factor. But I would say minimum 40, 50,000 pesos up to ideally probably like 60, 80 if you want to be comfortable. That gives you other spending. That's also factoring if you want to fly in different places, right?
Different places.
Yeah. So I enjoy making it. There are fun questions to answer because they relate to your own personal experience. As to I've been this year, I've spent quite a bit of time here in the Philippines. I've been here since mid-October, outside of 4 weeks outside of went home to Canada for Christmas. But that was a fun video to make. I have 4 staff here, so definitely enjoyable to make. So thank you for the experience, and hopefully that gave you what you needed.